Welcome back to the Write It Down podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Murata, bringing you one-on-one interviews to challenge, inspire, and encourage. It's been a hot minute since I've been on the mic, but I'm super thrilled to introduce this next guest. His name is Mike Ellison. He is an African-American actor and artist. He was born in Ethiopia, and he's based in Detroit area now. Mike has traveled all over the world. He's brought hope to so many people, and he tells us just how important it is to do the work and be open to all the different things that God might have for us, even though they might not look like what we thought they should look like. You know what to do. Sit back, relax, and get your pens ready, because this is Write It Down. Welcome back to the Write It Down podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Murata, here on the mic with Mike Ellison. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brooke.
I'm very pumped that we were connected through our good friend, Reggie Ball. He's the man. He always knows how to bring the best people together. So I'm honored to share your story. It's been a while since I've hosted on the podcast. Just life gets kind of crazy. So I'm absolutely stoked to have you on today. So thank you for making time for us.
Absolutely. Reggie Ball's the guy. So
he really is. Well,
yeah.
we'll have to kick it off with your story. I don't want to steal all your thunder by teeing you up, but you were born in Ethiopia and you moved over here to the States, and you've had quite a career with singing and acting and spoken word, and you've dabbled in so many little aspects of entertainment. So, Mike, let's go ahead and kick it off with what really got you started in the music industry coming over to the States.
Well, I would, to qualify just a bit, my parents, my mother and my late father from South Jamaica, Queens.
Nice.
So my father was in the State Department. So I'm American, but I was born in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up, my mother always said, "You're my African child, my Ethiopian child." And she would say, "You were born there for a purpose. I don't know what it is, but you were." And as mothers are, she proved to be right. So I grew up in Reston, Virginia, special place. Graduated South Lakes High School, went to the University of Virginia, and I started in sports marketing and management. Used to do PR for the US Open. That led me to Detroit, working for an agency that represented athletes, and that's where I met Reggie through some mutual friends. And it was great. Everybody wanted to be in sports at that time, but the artistry of Detroit really inspired me. And I just knew I had to figure out a way to work for myself and to incorporate art into my life. So really, I would say what started me was a place called Cafe Mahogany, where I used to do spoken word, and I would leave my job still in my suit and do open mic night. And then I started studying acting at the Detroit Repertory Theater. Shout out to my man, Harold Hogan, first acting coach who really changed the course of my life. So that's what got me started.
Okay. And then what were some of the doors that opened first? Was it in the music industry or was it in acting with your coach?
Neither.
Okay.
I was grassroots. Like at the time, Detroit, as you know, is great artists, but industry, so to speak, wasn't necessarily there. I worked with musically. I'm joking when I'm being facetious when I say neither, but when I started Detroit Repertory Theater, there were not film incentives in Michigan yet. So it was mostly commercial work or, training videos for, suppliers to the big three. And then there were more opportunities, but there was also like theater, which some incredible actors that inspired me. So I would say that and spoken word and spoken word got me on television before acting. The HBO Deaf Poetry did 2 seasons of that. And that was a big door opening, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like with all things, not just the entertainment industry, but we're going to talk entertainment industry because of your background and mine as well. When doors start to open for you in those spaces, they are definitely indicators that you're headed in the right direction. Was there a time in your life where it felt like no doors were opening or that kind of well dried up and you were like, what the heck am I doing with my life? I thought I had a direction for my purpose, but now, not so sure.
Absolutely. In Detroit initially, because I was inspired by what I saw and who I met, but people thought I was crazy because, I had this UVA degree and some relationships. I'm in sports, which everybody wanted to be in, but I really just wanted to carve my own path. But things were not happening, and it did not make sense to anyone that I would leave that world to figure this other world out. and it was nothing but closed doors.
Yeah.
However, I would say wherever there were closed doors, there were open-minded people that encouraged me, embraced me, people that really gave me a chance and encouraged me and didn't let me give up on myself.
Yeah.
And that was paramount.
What do you feel like was your, if you could put your finger on it, one of your biggest breaks?
Wow. I would say HBO Def Poetry was a huge break.
Yeah.
You know, getting on that show was huge. And I was blessed to do 2 seasons. Um, Another break that was kind of like long, it was like a domino effect. I had done this spoken word CD, and one of the poems I did was discussing the tobacco industry and their disproportionate advertising of Black and Latino communities, poor communities, and just their tactics. And that made it on the CD, underground CD, which made its way into a hand of a friend of a friend. And then they recommended me to do one conference for the American Cancer Society. And so I spoke and performed at this one conference and then developed a relationship. And then from there, we built something called the AfroFlow Tour, which was using music and community engagement to deal with tobacco cessation and cancer awareness.
Hmm.
So this one conference turned into a pilot concert. Then that pilot concert turned into a pilot tour. And that tour turned into a 7-year relationship
Wow.
where, yeah, we went to high schools, hospitals, colleges, universities, First Nation reservations, the projects, retirement homes. It was really an unprecedented model for the American Cancer Society. And I was an unknown, unsigned artist. But in addition to having the ACS as a partner, I also went out and got my own additional sponsors. So like Peli Peli, the urban clother, was one. Ethiopian Airlines. Through that relationship, we were able to take the first delegation of the American Cancer Society to support a guy named Dr. Bogali, who was working in oncology. Um, just Fused Beverages had come on, Chrysler. It was a major effort.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's your talent, was a catalyst for a lot of that. Like it's hard to see, like, again, we're kind of, when we were talking about like doors closing and feeling like, why do I feel like the dream that I had in my heart is taking a different shape? And then you're able to see that your dream in your heart and your talent and all of these things were like good reinforcements for
Yeah.
other things that were going to happen. Like, you didn't foresee, the American Cancer Society, this tour, helping people be free from tobacco abuse and just the damages and long-term effects that tobacco has on
Not
people.
at all. Not at all. In fact, it's interesting how things coalesce, right? Like in working in sports marketing and management, I did learn how to approach sponsors and how you pitch sponsors and to show value, right? So that gave me the knowledge to do that when that opportunity presented itself to perform for them and then to say, hey, we could take this further. Um, I could not have imagined that relationship. Um, even writing about the tobacco industry, I was just speaking from the heart,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
and it just kind of organically developed. Even when I was working to become an artist, I was freelancing. And one of the jobs I did was with a firm, a man named Lon Walls, who was a friend of my father's. And I did press work on this voter registration tour for the NAACP. So we would get in the bus, go in the deep south, make a ruckus, and register voters. And I was doing all the PR and press work on that tour. So when I met the folks in the American Cancer Society, I kind of melded art, entertainment, and that concept to develop the AfroFlow Tour. When we
Yeah.
got on the tour bus and wrapped it up and made a ruckus and went to towns. And, it wasn't, we were unknown entities. I don't want to present like we were just coming in town and playing stadiums. you
That,
know,
yeah.
no, you go to schools. Some
Yep.
stores were packed, some were empty. But it was all impactful because you're
Yeah. And
dealing with
that's where it
kids.
matters, though. That's where character in yourself is developed. And that's where I feel like some of the most special stories in your life happen when there's a limited audience, because everybody, especially with social media and people, you know, I, it's one of those things where everybody wants to have an audience. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to be the main star. And we're living in a world now where it's not like we have, I mean, barring Taylor Swift, we don't have like a Michael Jackson. Like everybody's a star, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like
And
with everybody's a star. Everybody can have a stage, can have a channel, can have a show, you know, and not degrading people's desires to do those things, but it makes the other things that are small maybe to the rest of the world but are big to us more impactful. And the conversations you probably had after those concerts, you they probably have changed your life.
no question. I mean, like, again, we crisscrossed the country, right? So we saw people of all shades, of all walks of life. And now you got to understand, the American Cancer Society and something called the AfroFlow Tour. And AfroFlow was a platform we were developing, inspired by the late Nigerian artist, the late great Fela Anikulapo Kuti. He's a creator of Afrobeat, which is now very popular, but it's a different form than Fela started. Right. Very different. But in any case, AfroFlow meant flowing from Africa, reminding people of the roots of hip hop and humanity. And when we would do these shows and talk to students, it wasn't finger wagging. It was really showing them how the tobacco industry was taking advantage of them and playing them. And we would have kids throwing out their cigarettes in the audience. They would come on stage and exchange for CDs, throwing out lighters and things. And then there were little girls who, you know, like were cutting and would show us. We got gang rags from people in exchange for music. It was because what they knew was we were talking about self-love.
Yeah.
And that was very, very, very gratifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things too. Like I love the picture of the exchange. You're exchanging whatever, tobacco, cutting yourself, hating yourself in exchange for something good. And I think when people are giving up something like an addiction, that's a strong addiction, I almost feel like they think they're not going to have the feeling as good, right? It's like you think that this feeling of tobacco or whatever drug or whatever you are addicted to, if for some reason you give it up, it's going to be worse off because the withdrawals and because it's just your vice. It's your thing that you do. And so I love the picture that you're exchanging something that's harming somebody and giving them something that could help them, which is music, which is, you know, peace through that beat, which is peace through conversation that you guys are putting out there on these tours. And so it's less about giving up and more about a better exchange.
Exactly. And it's all independent. And it was before a lot of the independent models you see now. And it's a tough position because you still come off like the corny do-gooder, right? You're trying to preach to people, but that was not the approach we took. But it was very, very meaningful. And then we had volunteers. I mean, you're meeting cancer survivors. We met a teenage girl who had more surgeries than years she'd been on the planet, you know, because of this type of cancer that she had. Just really meaningful, dedicated, hardworking people who wanted to make a difference in other people's lives. It wasn't just us. It was a communal effort. And, you know, it took blood, sweat, and tears to build and create. You know, to your point, you know, again, I don't knock anybody expressing themselves, whatever platform they use. It's just that now we're dealing with algorithms and not real people and real emotions.
Yep.
And then people don't feel important unless they're talking to a million. You know, one person is not enough. I can't just talk to Brooke. I'm only talking to Brooke if that one multiplies to 1 million.
Right.
And that's where we are now.
And that's an addiction in itself.
Probably so. You know, probably so. I'm not nearly as active as an artist in that realm as perhaps I could or should be. We'll see. That may shift. You know, we did the AfroFlow Tour just as some elements of social media were starting to pop.
Yep.
So it was new then, but it was boots on the ground, real interactions. And I still get correspondence from people we met years ago. When you talk about a door opening too, the biggest confirmation and perhaps the most meaningful was one of the poems I did on HBO was a poem called Mezaker, means to remember. It's a Giz language from Ethiopia, means remembrance. And it's just talking about human suffering in the broad context. And there was a young woman who reached out to me on Facebook years later and said that she was on the verge of suicide and
Mm.
saw that poem, changed her mind, and wanted to get the title Nezuker tattooed on her arm for years. And then she and her whole family did. And
Wow.
sent me a picture.
Wow.
And that was like, all right, if there's ever a moment when you doubt what you're supposed to be doing and who you're supposed to be doing it for, that is a tremendous honor and reminder for me.
Oh, it's huge. And it beats success by the world standards. It beats, having millions of people know your name. Again, not that those people don't have purpose with those platforms, but
Yeah.
it goes back to like that genuine desire to just help people because people are hurting. People
Yeah.
are broken.
And
Yeah.
I will say though, there are people that use that platform well. There are a
Oh,
lot
well,
of
for
people
sure.
who
Yes.
who use it well. So that was confirmation. And then again, like the biggest things that have happened for me, Brooke, are organic circumstances I could never have engineered. So I believe that's God in the universe, the prayers of my grandmothers,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I mean led to life-changing opportunities in Ethiopia where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we shared that in the bio, but like I was a volunteer with these doctors in Ethiopia that were doing medical infrastructure work there. And that was my dream just to go back to Ethiopia.
Right.
When we left, when you're a foreign national, you get help. Like my parents are from South Jamaica, Queens. They never had a maid, a nanny, or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So they go to Ethiopia. My older brother and sister are like 4 and 5. To make a long story short, we had a woman who helped out when I was first born. My mother had some challenges. We came very close. We had to leave Ethiopia for political reasons. It was very painful. My mother and her were close. I was close to her as a baby. And fast forward, I'm growing up with this notion of you're born in Ethiopia for a purpose. So I used to promise my mother one day I'm gonna go back and find this woman. Her name is Ethiopia. We used to call her Tobia. Long story short, I get linked up with these doctors. I go back to Ethiopia. This is before social media really took off. I had this experimental song called Everything Will Be All Right. Gave it to one DJ and some kids in a city called Lalibela. Then I meet this group of orphaned children. We shoot a music video. I do an interview on Ethiopian television about my history and trying to find this woman. And 6 months later, Brooke, the entire country knows the song. They know my story. They all sing the song. They know my name and my face and everything.
Mm.
So I come back 6 months later. They call me Mickey, and it's like, Mickey, did you find your mom? And then the host of the TV show found her and reconnected us. I flew my mother in a week later, surprised her, and I'm in the deep reaches of like the Tisabai region, we call, and you see children come out the Nile River singing my song,
Wow.
screaming my name, and it. I mean, I'm giving you a lot in a little capsule,
Yeah. What a
but it
picture.
but it changed my entire life and what I could do with music outside of the so-called industry.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
with that song, we were able to play fundraisers and support the construction of clinics, funding various programs. Um, it was life-changing.
Yeah.
And to be embraced by the Ethiopian people like that, um, I just, man, I can't even
And
put it into
and
words.
it's so cool because it was like spoken over you when you were a kid. And it goes back to that like you didn't have to engineer it or manufacture it yourself. It happened and it makes it more enjoyable.
No question.
Um,
I couldn't have engineered if I tried, Brooke.
yeah. But that's how God be, he definitely knows and orders our steps and knows like the doors that are going to open for us. And they're just more and more confirmations and it brings you joy. Like
And
it's fulfilling.
yeah, and opens those doors in spite of
Yeah,
ourselves.
I know.
In
That's
spite of, because
wild.
I mean, like the children I connected with, and I don't like just saying orphans, they were orphaned, but they were cared for by this program, My Hero, of a woman named Sister Tabeba Mako. She was a nurse by training, but she's like nurse practitioner, social worker, CEO. And when I came back the second time after my song had become popular, I didn't know it, and then they greeted me with my own music, in such this beautiful fashion that I can't even really put into words. It literally brought me to my knees in tears. And then if it couldn't get any stronger, Brooke, I'm trying to draw the picture for you, but I come in, I see these kids, and then they have this surprise for me behind the walls of this compound. These beautiful children playing my music, singing my song, dancing and hugging me. And Mickey, we miss you, we love you. I'm on my knees, literally just crying like this. And then this little girl gets on her knees, reaches up under my hands, and starts wiping my tears. Right.
Rip your heart out.
And I'm saying honestly, like when you say God, like I'm honestly saying to myself, man, God, what have I done or what will I do to deserve this? Because I didn't feel worthy of that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right?
And I
Is
wasn't, but
that's God's love. Like you don't deserve it. And that's what makes love from him and loving others so beautiful. And there's nothing more humbling than going outside of your, your four walls, so to speak. You don't necessarily, for those of you watching and listening, you don't necessarily have to go to a different country to experience this humility of going out there and meeting people that are different than you. We're going to take a quick break to discuss Write It Down's brand new website. You can head over to widpod.com, widpod.com, and see all the goods. You'll notice a banner at the top of the page that says Learn More. If you click that link, it'll show you how you can support Write It Down. P.S. My favorite part about the website is the Wid Wall, which is a collection of all the Write It Downs from the show. This podcast is made possible by the 1513 Network, so show the network some love and support by listening to their other shows. If not, just stick with Write It Down, because I'm the coolest, the realest, the illest. Now, back to the show. When you go to spaces that are outside of your, and same for people around the world coming here, when you are getting out of your element of what you see every single day and you're accustomed to it, and it's just your day in and day out, and you go out of the box and you see someone that looks different than you or lives different than you, whether it's more lavish or less lavish than you, it's humbling because you're in a space now where you're like, oh, somebody out there with the same sun, moon, and stars that I have goes to bed every night like I do, has a family like I do, has pets, has, all of these different things. It's back to that simple approach of like what that little girl did to you, where she's like, hey, like looking at eye level with you. Like,
yeah,
I'm with you.
Well, and even the term, like, I mean, not to get on a tangent, but like when I say redeveloping, right? Because like Ethiopia had an advanced, developed society when parts of Europe were still living in caves. So it's literally redeveloping, Greece. So you could say the same for different portions
of the world.
But I do think like because we live in a global economy in a global world now, it's important. So, but I learned, right? Like a lot of the work I was doing was through a charitable lens, if you will. But what Africans were saying is we're all entrepreneurs because we have to be. So don't come with pity and charity. Let's do business, invest, let's work. And that was a huge lesson for me. It continues to be just humbled in so many ways. And I don't mean to belabor the point, but as you can see,
no.
The people and the culture and the place are just so near and dear and have influenced me in so many areas of my life.
Yeah, which I think it's cool because now it's part of your story and you're able to share it with us. And, it helps bring even more awareness to how we approach the world and how we are living each day we should want to grow. We should want to be humbled. We should want to see doors open that no man can shut. And that's what brings us all together. It doesn't matter where you're from or, what you do. It's that beautiful balance that you're talking about of coming together. I do want to tap into a little bit of your NFL. The draft was last night. I know this episode won't air right away, but the draft was in Detroit, but you had a little bit of a interaction with the NFL draft as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was, see, again, like the gift that keeps on giving. That was years ago, a collaboration between HBO, Def Poetry, and the NFL. And I was tapped along with some other artists to represent, various cities for the draft. And so as it turns out, like that year, one of the people that I got to write about was Calvin Johnson. who would go on to become, Megatron and the Hall of Fame wide receiver. So I did that years ago, and then that led to doing poetry to introduce Thursday night football some years later. So it was cool, growing up. Even I was in the Virginia DMVs, we call it DC, Maryland, Virginia. But I grew up a Steelers fan.
Oh,
So yeah, but I mean, so just as a kid growing up watching the NFL and then to use poetry to highlight it, that was a very cool collaboration.
yeah, being able to see all your worlds kind of collide and come together. Before we get to our rapid fire portion, Andrew, write it down. I do want to ask a little bit about your childhood. I know we're backtracking,
Okay.
but did you, when you were a kid, did you always have a dream to perform and to be in these spaces? Because I know that you had the sport management and that type of thing. So when you were a kid, what did you envision your life looking like?
It's funny. I didn't even envision any of this, but I'm a proud child of hip hop because, like I said, all my family's from South Jamaica, Queens. So my cousin was like a hip hop god to me because he was tall, he was handsome, and he could pop, he could DJ, he could rap, he could do graffiti. Like he was all the
All of
elements
it.
of hip hop,
Yep.
and that influenced me. But I was like a corny kid from Virginia, but hip hop always informed me and supplemented my education because artists like Public Enemy, there's so many, Rakim, like made me read more, right? So that influenced my childhood a lot. The other benefit, Brooke, is that, my parents divorced after coming back from Ethiopia. They were still friends, but my mother chose to stay and rest in Virginia as opposed to go back to Queens. And it turned out to be a good thing because Reston was the country's first planned community,
Mm.
and Robert Simon, and I want to make sure I get the story right, but the founder's family, they owned Carnegie Hall in New
Oh, okay.
York. And
Yeah.
my understanding is that he sold it to develop Reston, but it was an intentional live work play space of mixed income, mixed so-called race, gender preference, you name it. And he started this in the 60s and got pushback, as you can imagine, in Virginia. But he developed this community so that the kid who grew up in Northgate Apartments could go to school with kids from other areas. And I had access to public tennis courts, basketball, swimming, lakes, trees, bike paths. And there are friends of mine of all shades that now, as we reconnect as adults, we didn't realize just how special this place of
Right.
Reston. So Reston cultivated who I am today. So it's kind of to your point. I didn't have this dream of going to Hollywood, but I always had a dream of being involved in the arts. It just took me a longer path to understand how to engage with it and then to become proficient.
Yeah.
I'm, I was not in certain areas I had talents, but other areas I didn't.
Right.
And so I didn't have like just the natural thing as it relates to certain, things I do now. Stuff
Right.
I had stub my toe, bump my head, get knocked down, get told no, go back to the drawing board and start over.
Right. And so knowing what you know now about
Mm-hmm.
yourself and about the doors that have opened and some of the other indicators in your life,
Mm-hmm.
where do you want to go?
I want to go exactly where I am right now. That's it. I literally want to do exactly what I'm doing and just be more present and more proficient.
Yeah.
Um, and I say that because, I mean, I think the things that are going on in the world, the people we've lost during the pandemic,
Mm,
just remind you that to be here is a blessing.
it really is.
Health is a blessing. I
Life
don't
is
share
short.
it is, and I don't share my family on social media, but I have beautiful children, and I always want to be with them every waking second that I can. So that's really it. I
I
just
love
want to
it.
continue to do
You're
what I'm doing.
content. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you strive to improve,
Right.
right? But I feel like, like Napoleon Hill would say and other thought leaders, you work harder on yourself to become better, right? Then you'll attract these other opportunities.
Hmm.
And that's what I've learned too, Brooke. Like there are times where I'd be in the right room with the right people and say the wrong damn thing or nothing, or you're pursuing something, you're told you're supposed to be hungry and a go-getter, and then you just look thirsty or desperate. And
Yep.
so what I've learned is like when you pursue these things, they run faster and further. But when you work on you and the value you bring to the market and to people, it pulls in who and what you
Yes.
need.
Yeah. Well,
That's
and
what
it's
that's what
like
I found.
focusing on what you've already been given. Like, you know, your family, the roof over your head, the business opportunities you've already been given. Like, it's literally tending to what you already have and
Yeah.
trusting that the doors and things will grow.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And you know, I live as what I call an executive artist. That's what I've claimed for years. So as an artist, I've done albums, tours, you know, theater, film, television, a lot of voiceover work I still
yeah.
do. But on the other side, I have clients that I work with creative strategy and content. Like, you know, I co-produced a video with some friends promoting Detroit tourism. We remixed the great George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic song "One Nation Under a Groove" with the children's choir, and it went viral and earned us an Emmy. So, you know, I've engaged with universities, with artist residencies, and as I mentioned, in that corporate space. So I love where I am now. It's a blend of all the things that I enjoy. There's room to grow and get better, but
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
focused on the blessing that is here right
Here
now.
right now, being
Yeah.
present. I love that. I'm going to ask you a couple rapid fire questions and then we'll get to our write it down.
All right, let's
Um,
go.
okay, first one is if you could share a stage with any artist, who would it be?
Stevie Wonder,
Oh, I would love that collab. Instrument you wish you could play.
saxophone like John Coltrane.
I love the saxophone. Straight up. Okay, would you rather watch the Oscars or the Grammys?
That's a tough one.
I
Can
know.
I, can I say both like they do on Drink Champs and I have to
Yeah,
take a shot?
take them both.
Uh,
Best place you've ever performed?
wow. Oh, that's a split. Ethiopia for sure in Addis at this event in Addis, but also in Kigali, Rwanda for the Pan African Dance Festival opening prior to the Miss Lauryn Hill coming on stage thereafter.
Wow.
And
What a
seeing
night.
and seeing thousands of Rwandans very quickly, I would say, hey, nobody can tell me exactly what Rwanda means. So with your permission, we like to interpret it this way: rebuild with Africa, never divide again. And then we had this beat going and chanting that, and to look out and see a sea of beautiful Rwandan people screaming, rebuild with Africa, never divide again, was life changing.
Wow. Wow. I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
NBA or NFL?
NBA.
Okay. Who's your team?
Growing up, I was a Sixers fan.
Okay.
Now I just kind of root for players and coaches that I like
That you
because
like.
shift so much.
It really does. It's very fast moving. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we are at that point of the show where I ask each guest to give the audience something to write down. So, Mike Ellison, what is your write it down?
My write it down comes from a good friend's mother. So my friend's name is Aku Kadogo, but her mother's a wonderful woman named Hilda Vest. She's, I believe, 92, still creating. And Mama V, or Big H, as we call her, used to say, she would say, "Do your work." And that was profound because if you put the emphasis on each word, it really explains. So do, you got to do. I know we talk about affirmations, but you can't just sit and look in the mirror and talk. You got to get up and do something. Your, like what Brooke is doing is what Brooke is doing. That's
Mhm.
not my work.
Right.
And as you mentioned with social media, we're watching everybody and, oh, now that looks good or that looks appealing or look at what they're doing, living their best life. Hey, that's their work. Do your work. And then third, it is work. Even if it's something that you love, it's work. And so, in all this complexity that we live in now, those three simple words help recenter me, you
Mhm.
know, because we can all get off track. And, oh man, look at what Brooke's doing. She's blowing up and this is that. It's like, hold on, hold on, hold on.
What am I doing? Yeah, like focus.
Do your work.
Yep. I love
That's
it.
it.
Well, thank you so much, Mike Ellison. Write it down. It's been a pleasure having you today and sharing your story. Thank you so much. And I hope to have you back on another time. And I hope we can stay good friends. So thank you for joining us.
That'd be wonderful, Brooke. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Write It Down podcast. This podcast is a part of the 1513 network. You can catch a variety of shows on their website, 1513.com. If you enjoy listening to Write It Down, please subscribe, share with your friends, and if there's any ink left in your pen, write a review. For more content, follow the fun on Instagram by following at WIDPOD. That spells WIDPod. It's super cool. Stands for Write It Down Podcast, but it's abbreviated to WIDPod. Anyways, thanks for listening, and we will catch you later.